Good morning and welcome to this CNBC Africa special. I'm Chris Bishop, and on the day of the Africa Investment Forum, we give you this live panel discussion to start things off on Mauritius IFC, the idea of championing international investment to accelerate Africa's growth and to promote the island nation of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean as an investment destination. Now, joining me is a panel of experts from Mauritius, starting with Parek Tulsidas, the Senior Executive Treasury and Markets, Afro-Asia Bank, Timo Geldenhuys of Sotheby's International Realty, Roshan Nathu, the Managing Director of Rogers Capital, and Kate Bosman, Senior Associate, Denton's Mauritius, in the legal game there. So I'll just start off with, just go around the table. You all work there, you all know all the issues. Why is it anyone in this world should look at investing in Mauritius?
I would say good morning, first of all, Chris and the audience. I would say, first of all, that Mauritius is part of Africa. Maybe a lot of people do not really realize it, but we are one of the founder members of the African Union, COMESA, SADC, and I think over the years we've built a really some expertise in terms of financial, financial institutions, financial management as well. And at the start, it was probably more to do around, Mauritius being a low tax jurisdiction. But over the years, I think we've gained a lot of momentum in terms of, building everything around, things to do around the financial, centers, etc. So I think Mauritius over the years has become a very interesting place to be in. We've built a lot of expertise, as I mentioned. So I think it's become more and more popular for people who want to invest in Africa using Mauritius as an investment hub.
So Timo, move to you. You're part of half the panel who've decided to swap this country here, South Africa, for Mauritius. Why do you think it's a place where investors should be looking?
Yeah, I think we look at it a lot more from a lifestyle perspective. From a lifestyle perspective in Mauritius, it offers incredible opportunities. Guys who are basing their businesses there, move their families out there. We have access to phenomenal healthcare, schooling, just general lifestyle, day-to-day security, etc. So, guys who are looking at investing into Africa and basing themselves out of Mauritius, it's a fantastic place to be based. And also from a connectivity perspective, Mauritius is right centered between Europe and the Middle East. So there are daily flights going in and out from Africa and from Europe and the Middle East. So it's just a great place to base yourself and to hub yourself from an investment perspective into the rest of Africa.
Roshan.
Yes, good morning. So I think the aim is for Mauritius to be what like Luxembourg is to Europe, or Singapore is to the Far East, Hong Kong is to China. It pays for pooling up investors in a business-friendly, neutral environment so that they can sort of, from there, springboard investments into Africa. So we've been, I think, quite good at it so far. As at, I think, mid last year, there were more than $36 billion worth of investment, which have come from Mauritius going into Africa. We are not the only ones sort of vying for this business. There are other centers. But I think where we have got an edge is that apart from economic and cultural ties with Africa, we know Africa because we are part of it.
And what's your view on this one from a legal point of view?
Well, I think going into Africa, Mauritius offers significant protection. So investors going into different African countries might be unsure of things like political and economic instability, red tape, nationalization, obtention of permits and licenses. Mauritius, structuring your business or setting up in Mauritius offers you significant protection with its numerous advantages of already being an African country and having the advantages of being part of SADC, COMESA and the African Union. Also having a wide array of investment protection promotion agreements, so that investment protection going into Africa. I think from a legal standpoint, a really important assurance for investors is your highest court of appeal is the Privy Council in the UK. So that offers investors quite a lot of assurance going into Africa. They know that if they structure their businesses in Mauritius through to Africa, there is the UK Supreme Court worst case scenario.
So, Paddy, if I come back to you, I mean, a lot of people, when you talk about investing in Mauritius, they say, "Oh no, but it's all about tax. That's it." Your top rate of corporate tax we were talking about before, 15%, which is probably the envy of many countries around the world. Is it just a tax thing? What is it?
No. So what happened is that when the financial center, if you want, started, or what we call global business started in the 90s. It started as a case where we had a double taxation agreement with India, which made it beneficial for people wanting to invest in India to route it via Mauritius. Over the years, we've signed, yes, a number of double taxation agreements, as well as what Kate mentioned, the IPPAs, which gave comfort to investors that want to invest into India, but also into Africa more and more. And what's happened is that we've sort of become, if you want, the hub or the connection, the bridge, if you want, between Asia and Africa, and also a lot between Europe and Africa as well. So over the years, what's happened is that the jurisdiction has wanted to create more substance. So it's no more just about the taxation. Today, what happens is that we want people to come and invest. We want people to hire, locals, bring their own people. We want to create that ecosystem around this whole, if you want, IFC that we have in Mauritius, so that there is more integration, if you want, into the Mauritian economy as well. And I think that's something that is work in progress. It doesn't happen overnight, but what I have to say is that it started off pretty well. And today we have a number of international corporates that use Mauritius as a hub for investing or trading with Africa as well. I mean, I can name a few. You've got the likes of Huawei. You've got some of the other large institutions as well that use Mauritius as a base for investing in Africa. So I think the taxation piece is now probably, it's there, yes, but I think it's much more than that.
So Timo, I mean, in your property game, I want to talk a lot more later about what is happening in property. I know it's a big story in Mauritius, but in terms of, I mean, how does the tax affect your sort of business in the property game?
Look, I think it plays a massive role because a lot of the guys who are trying to take advantage of the fiscal benefits need to live somewhere, and to be fiscal resident in Mauritius, you need to be there 183 days of the year. You need to spend a certain amount of days consecutively. I think it's 90 days consecutively. So it largely influences the property side because obviously they need to live somewhere. These are generally high net worth individuals. They're moving their businesses over there. As a result, they're moving families over. So those families need to live somewhere. And and we create that platform for them to live. We build beautiful estates. We put in the infrastructure necessary for families to be able to survive there in an environment which is second to none. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that from a property perspective, it latches onto the fiscal benefits of what Mauritius offers.
Roshan, I mean, we were discussing this before the program. I mean, for a long time there's been a tax relationship between here, South Africa and Mauritius. I know the tax authorities here have reviewed that situation here, but how long do you think this arrangement may last, do you think, between the two countries?
I think Mauritius has strong and lasting cultural and economic ties with South Africa. To answer your question directly, I think it's here to stay. I'll quote a report by the United Nations, which came out mid this year. So out of they analyzed world investments, routing of investments worldwide into various countries. So out of the top 10 countries into which Mauritius companies have invested, there are only 4 of them with which we have tax treaties. The rest, they've used Mauritius for other reasons. So there must be other compelling reasons why they are using Mauritius to go into Africa or even South Africa for that matter. So you've got the usual, exchange control, free environment, strong legal regulatory framework, competitiveness in terms of costs, etc. So this is one aspect of it. The other aspect is that we have, as an IFC, commitments towards international organizations like the OECD or the EU, and it cannot be all about tax. Just to give you, from a technical point of view, we are a member of what we call the MLI, the Multilateral Treaty Agreement of the OECD. So 100 countries have participated in that agreement. What it basically says is that it's an agreement to ensure that big corporates don't shift their profits to low tax jurisdiction to avoid paying tax. So we have certain commitments there, same for the EU. So the message is that yes, tax is important, but it's not only about tax. And it works both ways. It promotes investments in the target countries as well as helping centers like Mauritius to grow.
If I could come to you now, you obviously deal with a lot of the companies looking to invest and drawing up agreements and sorting out their financial issues. What kind of companies, international companies, are coming to Mauritius looking to invest in this day and age?
So we're getting, I suppose, a lot of international companies and a lot of companies that are wanting to have particularly a focus on Africa. Because Mauritius has been particularly focusing on the African aspect. We're seeing a lot of funds and private equity, a lot of global business companies, anything from real estate to mining to,
Interesting times indeed. If I come back to you, Parik, I mean, this idea of Mauritius becoming like a global financial center, like a Singapore, like a Hong Kong in the Indian Ocean, how far do you think the country is from there?
I think the foundation has been set. If you ask me today, we are sort of a regional hub, a regional financial center, focusing mainly on Africa and Asia and trying to bridge that gap between the two continents. Becoming an international or global financial center will take time. It doesn't happen overnight, as I mentioned earlier. But I think there are, the right things are being done. We are still in the process of moving from only, as I mentioned earlier, was being used as, for fund administration and helping cross-border investments. But today we are moving more towards substance where you're talking corporate finance, you're talking investment products, you're talking, wealth management. I think that's a major focus as well. We need to get more expertise into the country as well. Yes, we have expertise in terms of, as I mentioned, fund administration and cross-border investments, but I think everything to do with corporate finance, investment banking, we need more international law firms as well to come to Mauritius. We need more connectivity as well in terms of, the various parts of Africa and sort of encouraging large institutions, targeted institutions to come and set up in Mauritius and have their regional if you want, centers based out of Mauritius and getting their people to come in as well. I think the framework is being set. I think there's a blueprint as well, that you've got different stakeholders that have contributed to, whether it's government, regulators, the private sector, etc. And I think, there are stepping stones. It doesn't happen overnight, as I mentioned, so it's step by step, and I think we will get there in the near future.
I'll come back to you, Timo, because I want to talk a bit more about the business you're involved in there. But Roshan, we come across to you from a financial point of view here. I mean, the economy is growing about 6.6% this year, again, which is the envy of a lot of other countries on this continent. What do you think that Mauritius is maybe doing right that other countries aren't on this continent?
You mean generally, or
generally,
is it
in terms of
financial sector?
Yeah.
I think what's key is that a lot of investment has gone into education, into infrastructure, into building up the sort of image of Mauritius. There's still work to be done in terms of that image, perception, etc. So far, I mean, it's also we've been successful in that. When you speak of Mauritius, it's mostly tourist destination, white beaches, blue seas, etc. We have to work on the other areas like financial services. But what has happened is Mauritius actually has grown, has experienced positive growth since 1982. So for more than 30 years, Mauritius has grown significantly. In the past few years, the component of this growth has been mostly consumer expenditure and investment, public investment in infrastructure. The others are still there: tourism, ICT, agriculture, manufacturing. But I think we need to develop new areas of growth. One of them is the oceanic-based industry. They call it the blue economy. We are surrounded with oceans, so this is one area. The others, like we mentioned earlier on, is the skill gap. There is a mismatch between what is available and what we need. There is also certain efficiencies to be gained in terms of digitalization of the economy to improve efficiency. And finally, like we said, we have to work on the perception, the reputation of Mauritius. And this is a government-to-government sort of what we call experience, or government-to-government mission, private sector to institutions relationship that we have to build, a relationship with the individual. So far, I think it's going well, but we see some of the industries probably losing steam slightly. So there is additional focus to be put into that, additional effort. But then new economies are emerging. Again, we have to sort of catch the train there or join the bandwagon there.
So Tim, if I come to your business, I mean, you're in property. Would I be wrong in saying that this particular time when the whole world economy is still struggling, that there's a bit of a boom still going on in the Mauritian property market?
Yeah, I think from a property perspective, and I'll focus specifically in on the international property market. Mauritius is quite young in terms of international property. Foreigners could only buy there from around 2005. There have been various schemes that government has implemented over the years, and we've tried to move with the times. We were very strong through the economic crisis in 2009. We weren't majorly affected like the rest of the world. We didn't have the credit crunch, so there weren't a whole lot of people defaulting on property. By nature of what we sell, we have very high net worth individuals coming and buying into Mauritius, and so we've moved with the times. And then more recently, we've implemented schemes where we've integrated the opportunity for foreigners to buy in the same area where locals can buy. So it merges these two markets. It's specifically the smart city concept, which I'm sure we'll speak about a little bit more later. And that's helped maintain the boom, so to speak, of the property market in Mauritius. We're not immune to what happens in the world. We certainly do get affected, and I don't want to make it sound like we're all roses and sunshine where the rest of the world is doom and gloom. But we do maintain our own. We are solid in terms of returns on investment and also on rental returns. So all in all, it's a very safe jurisdiction for people to invest into property with decent capital growth and decent rental returns.
I want to come back to you in a minute and talk about smart cities, something I'm very, very interested about. But Parik, if I can come back to you as well, talking about, Roshan was talking about the image of the country. But I mean, one of the other little assets that Mauritius has is political stability. Yes. I mean, I don't think I can ever remember reading a story about unrest or political violence in Mauritius. No. How does your country maintain that kind of stability?
I think, Mauritius being an island, there's an understanding amongst, whether it's the political parties or the country in general, that, political stability is extremely important for us to be able to prosper. Now, don't forget that, we don't have any minerals and commodities, right? Only commodity we have is sugar. And so, which is mainly agriculture. So the main, if you want, strength of our nation is the people. Now, this is what we sell. We sell our services, right? We need to have highly educated people. or educated people for that matter. Yes, as my colleagues were mentioning, there are skill gaps, but we have become sort of, or created a niche for ourselves into the financial sector, into the tourism sector as well. And I think, in terms of political stability, I mean, you look at, for example, we had the general elections last week. Everything was smooth, went on really smooth. If you were voting in Mauritius last Thursday, I mean, you wouldn't know there was an election in Mauritius because it was so quiet as well. And we had some UN observers who were there, and I think, their thought was that, is that really an election going on in the country? So people would just go into the voting centers, vote quietly, come out, go home. So this is how it is. This is how it's always been for the last 50 years of, since we've got independence as well. There's an understanding that, political stability, as I mentioned, is key to the development of the country. And this is also why, it gives investors the confidence to come and live in Mauritius as well, because you need that comfort to feel safe in a jurisdiction. And I think it's also helped in terms of, all the companies that are using Mauritius as a base to invest elsewhere in Africa. It creates that right environment and a beautiful infrastructure to be in, to be able to prosper your business as well.
Timo, if I could come to you, obviously you work for an international company, Sotheby's, and you're funneling a lot of investment into Mauritius, and high net worth individuals going to live there. I mean, how much do you ever fear that there could be a backlash where people will in Mauritius start saying, well, people from outside are coming in and buying up our island? Do you think it's ever likely?
Yeah, I think government's been great in that sense. It's been a very systematic approach to it. They've been careful to manage the political side of it. But I also think there's a great misconception as to the number of foreigners that are actually coming in. There's obviously a number of expats, so to speak, that live and work there that don't necessarily own property. They rent property from locals. For example, the house that I live in, I rent from a Mauritian. So from that side of things, the expats and the international markets actually assisting the local market and putting money into the pockets of the Mauritians. So that on the one side. And then on the other side, yes, there is a bit of a fear, and you sense it from time to time. But again, I say it's very carefully managed. Since 2005, when the international property market kicked off in Mauritius, we've only sold about 2,500 properties to foreigners. And you put that into perspective. For example, to South Africa, you have a development like Dainfern or Steyn City. That whole development, one development, is what we've sold in total in Mauritius. So, it's a misconception more than a reality. And I think the local population have become educated in that sense, and they understand that it's important for FDI to flow into the country, and a lot of the FDI that flows in is through property investment. And then the spin-off from that is great. I just want to mention one example. In 2015, there were $3,200 millionaires in Mauritius. They reckon by 2025 there will be $7,200 millionaires in Mauritius. And the spin-off for those guys living in Mauritius, it goes into all sectors of the economy. Often these high net worth individuals, they come over there with the intention to retire, but guys with money get bored, right? So they go and they look at other things to do, and they invest into local businesses. They do their own. They open. They employ people. So the spin-off from that property investment is massive, and the local population, I think, understands that.
So Roshan, as a born and bred Mauritian, I mean, many years ago interviewing Klaba Gatete, he was the finance minister for Rwanda, and he said to me, listen, we want foreign companies to come into our country and take over the economy. We want the money, we want the investment, we want the jobs, we want the growth. And I said to him, don't you think there's ever going to be a tipping point one day when perhaps the people of Rwanda feel it's too much, they feel they're being overrun by foreign investors? And he thought about it for a minute. He said, no, I don't think so. What do you think is the situation in Mauritius? Do you think it could ever be that tipping point?
I think we joined Rwanda there, I think. But if you think about it, the Mauritius nation is a nation of immigrants, really. We all come from somewhere in the world, whether it's 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So obviously we love our country, but the country doesn't belong to anyone. We belong to the country. This is, I think, the mindset that we have. So much so, I don't want to boast about it, but we don't every day think about political stability, economic stability. It's a way of life. I think the reason it's reached that stage is probably that everyone feels at home and has a share of the cake, share of the pie that they are able to bring home, and they feel that sense of belonging. And I think people who come from abroad, this is exactly what they like about Mauritius, and I don't think there is any intention or agenda to change that. They want to be part of the landscape, part of the setup, part of the Mauritius way of living. So I don't foresee any tipping point happening soon because everybody has so much to lose out on. But it's not something that we think about at night or are concerned about. It's a way of life in Mauritius.
And Kate, what do you say? I mean, from a legal point of view, though, I mean, no matter who you are, it strikes me where if you're on in the world, you have the same sort of protection and quite a lot of protection as well from the courts and the law when it comes to investment.
Yes, but as I said earlier, particularly in Mauritius, where you have the Privy Council in the UK, that additional assurance. So yes, there is good rule of law. There are high quality legal services on the island. We are seeing international brands there now, such as Denton's. So yeah, there's excellent legal services.
Okay, and anyway, we're going to a quick break now. We're going to commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking a lot more about investing in Mauritius. Do stay with us. Good morning and welcome back to CNBC Africa Special. I'm Chris Bishop, and on the day of the Africa Investment Forum, we've got like a breakfast talk going on here about the case for Mauritius, the island nation in the Indian Ocean, and why people should maybe consider investing there. And also we're looking behind the story to some of the issues now. Still with me, my guest, Parek Talsidas, the Senior Executive, Treasury and Markets, Afro-Asia Bank, Timur Geldenhuis, Sotheby's International Realty, Roshan Nathu, the Managing Director of Rogers Capital, and Kate Bosman, the Senior Associate at Denton's Mauritius. So just before the break, we were about to talk about this issue of medical tourism. I mean, I've been there, I've written stories on it. People say to me that Mauritius has got the doctors, it has built in the hospitals, maybe it can compete with India and maybe even South Africa when it comes to such things. How likely is it that this could turn into a major industry in Mauritius?
Well, I think what's happened is that over the years, you've got some of the groups that are involved in the medical industry who have hospitals in Mauritius have also invested in hospitals in Africa. So they are going into that niche market, if you want. At the same time, what's happening is that, in terms of medical equipment, getting the right doctors, there's been a lot of investment on that front as well. And, so the plan is really to get Mauritius as sort of a medical hub as well going forward. With the investments that are happening in Africa, I think, there is a drive to, eventually to have people who can afford it to come to Mauritius. And there's one thing that's happened which is very interesting is, and I think, we've had a few examples in Mauritius, is that there's sort of medical homes that are being built, which are part of an integrated sort of compound where you've got, the healthcare, you've got the people who can stay for long term as well. So you can buy property there as well. You've got the entertainment around it, so people can live there, do their shopping, watch movies, etc. So I think this is something that a few groups in Mauritius have gone into, and they feel that there is a potential for people to use Mauritius as a medical, health care hub, if you want. And as I mentioned, there's also the government that is investing massively into specialized healthcare services. So we've got an oncology treatment hospital that is going to be built very soon as well. So all of that, I think, adds up to the fact that it can become eventually a medical hub. And we've got the expertise as well now in Mauritius.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Because, I think often the medical tourism is based around aesthetics, and it's the facelift and some other lifts that need to be done. And there's a shorter recuperation time, and often for these clients and these patients, privacy is of the utmost importance. So we've dealt with a lot of groups that have looked at putting in a clinic where the specialists, actually some of the specialists will fly in because they're very specific. They'll come in, they'll do 20 or 30 procedures. The clients will fly in because it's a tourism thing, and they'll recuperate in these exclusive resorts where they don't mind walking around where other people are in a similar state to what they are. The climate's obviously fantastic. We've got beautiful sunshine, so your recovery time is a lot quicker. So we've dealt with a lot of potential investors into that medical tourism sector, and some of it's looking really, really positive, and I think it's something that will evolve over time.
So Roshan, but how tough is the competition out there for, for the kind of medical tourism we're talking about here?
So I read somewhere that in 2016 we had about 18,000 people from outside of Mauritius who actually came to Mauritius for inpatient and outpatient treatment. So it's quite a sizable market if you think about it.
And put that into context, that's about half the population of the capital, Port Louis, is it not?
Yeah. a bit less. But
yeah.
But that being said, most of those people are coming from places like the Seychelles, Madagascar, and all those good countries. But I think, like Parik and Thibaut have said before, I think we've got all the ingredients to boost this sector. Just to one another statistic, we have 2 medical colleges in Mauritius, and you have people from South Africa and India who actually come and study there. So this is there, the infrastructure is already there. If you think about it also, healthcare is free in Mauritius for Mauritians. Private sector, they are very active in building hospitals and all of that. If they get the skills either from Mauritius or elsewhere, and then you have the usual tax and government incentives at all. So all the ingredients, I think, will definitely help in grow the sector, in growing the sector. What we need is obviously, again, marketing ourselves out, creating that image of Mauritius being a hub, not only a tourism hub or a financial services hub, but also potentially a medical hub. But I'm confident that it is bound to grow. We have got a track record. We've got skilled people there. There's no reason why it shouldn't grow. And the cost, obviously, important factor, is very competitive as well.
And Kate, is it likely to have an impact on the legal profession, this kind of medical tourism? You're dealing with people from all over the world with all kinds of issues and legal backgrounds.
Yes, I think we've seen a major interest from clients, and particularly from Europe and also parts of Africa. But I'm sure, hopefully there's not too many legal issues that crop up. But it certainly is a very interesting sector, and something that we would like to get more involved in.
And just coming back to you, Parik, I mean, one of the big questions in this whole Mauritius investment case is competition. I mean, you are not the only stable financial centre around the world now. I mean, everyone's getting into it. How concerned are you about the competition from around the world for Mauritius for investment?
Look, I'll come back to what I said earlier. We are, we're not global financial centre yet. It's a path, it takes time. But I think what we are is a regional financial centre. Now in the region as well, you've got the likes of Johannesburg, Cape Town, etc. that play into that space. You've got Kenya, Nairobi, which is trying to be a regional financial centre as well. Rwanda has ambitions as well. In West Africa, you've got Côte d'Ivoire, you've got Northern Africa, you've got Casablanca, etc. that want to compete in that space. I think it's healthy competition. I don't think we are here to compete. I think we are here to complement. I think we've built over the years some skill sets that mark us apart from what the others do. Our skill set has been more in terms of cross-border investment into Africa and into Asia. It has been more in terms of fund administration as well, where we have a lot of expertise in the country. But now what we're trying to do is we're going more in terms of investment banking, corporate finance, funding different businesses in Africa, connecting Asia and Africa. I think one thing we've done pretty well, I mean, I've seen it a lot in our case as well, is where we're connecting banks as well from Asia and Africa in terms of traders that want to take cannot take African risk, Asians that cannot take African risk, and we are sort of being the conduit to that because we understand the continent. So I think if you say competition, I don't think it's really competition. I think it's more complementary because one thing we need to understand is that we know the rhetoric. Africa is growing, younger population, the growth potential is huge. So I think there's space for everyone. And the more there's connection, I think it can stay within Africa, doesn't have to go outside. I mean, you look, for example, at very simple stuff. You look at, the Afrasia Wealth Report that came out recently. You've got 140,000 millionaires in Africa. I think that's huge potential. And it doesn't have to be one financial center that can cater for that. It can be a mix, and everyone can actually work together towards achieving what is good for the continent eventually. So I think this is how I see it, really.
So Timo, I mean, in your property game, there's also increased competition these days. I mean, people are looking at Cyprus, maybe Portugal, all these places, maybe away from Mauritius. How does Mauritius deal with that?
Look, I think it's been challenging from that perspective. There's specific target markets where that's important. So from a South African perspective, for example, it definitely impacts us. The reality is South Africans are buying elsewhere for various reasons. Number one is citizenship. It's to potentially get a passport for a second country or residency. Mauritius offers the permanent residency with the purchase of the property. But it's also the externalization of funds, so it's into a solid jurisdiction where the rand or the other currency is being turned into a foreign currency. So, yeah, we have solid competition from Cyprus, from Portugal, from Spain and Malta, etc., etc. But from a South African perspective, because of our proximity to South Africa and Mauritius, it's just a 4-hour flight away. There's a sense of familiarity. I think we compete well. I do think as a jurisdiction more can be done, and we are constantly canvassing government and working together with government to try and keep at least parity with our competitors. But yeah, it's something that we do struggle with from time to time, but I think we're holding our own in terms of the global environment.
Roshan, we've talked a lot about financial services. We talked about property here. We're going to talk about smart cities in a second. But what other industries are sprouting up? We talked about blockchain, I suppose, which is connected to the financial. I've seen in Port Louis the tech hub that has been built there. But what other industries are likely to spring up in Mauritius in the future?
I think one area where there has to be a lot of focus on is the blue economy, the oceanic-based industry. So Mauritius is not only Mauritius, we've got several islands which belong to the country. So I think this remains to be exploited, whether it's in terms of fisheries, whether in terms of other ancillary sort of activities that can be done from there. I think this is one industry. There's also a lot of focus on the tech industry through giving incentives, through attracting world-class skills to Mauritius. There is also one industry which is emerging nicely, quietly, but emerging nicely, and that is the learning and education industry. You've got now at least 2 international universities who've got campuses in Mauritius, the Middlesex University, Paris Sorbonne. We've also got the African Learning University. So, and there are hundreds of international students who are actually coming to Mauritius to these universities. So I would say on the learning front, which is an industry which is growing because it's not only universities, it's rental of houses, catering, all those services that goes with it. There's also the blue industry, the blue economy. So these are, I think, up-and-coming industries apart from the traditional ones.
Kate, I mean, there's one thing that always interests me about this kind of stuff, the blue economy, it's fairly new. Doesn't it spawn a whole raft of new regulations and that the legal game has to keep up with? How difficult is that sometimes?
It's not too difficult because we are often, it's quite easy to keep abreast of what is going on, and Mauritius is constantly growing, new sectors are constantly growing, so we're always having to keep up with new developments on all different kinds of sectors. So yeah, it is pretty easy to keep up.
And in terms of skills in your sector, in the legal sector, I mean, is it fairly well serviced? Is it fairly well furnished with experts?
So we have a couple of international brands on the island, such as Denton's. Those law firms that are not part of international networks or part of international brands are part of international networks. So most law firms have some kind of international or regional reach. Denton's is the first really large global law firm on the island. It's the largest law firm in the world. We're able to connect our clients from parts of China to remote parts of South America, throughout Africa. So we are getting there. And
okay, Parik, if I come back to you, we touched on fintech here. We talked about blockchain. I mean, how likely is it, do you think, that Mauritius could one day be like, the sort of Silicon Valley of Africa out there in the Indian Ocean?
Okay, so I wanted to actually touch upon the point that Kate made in terms of the regulatory framework. I think one thing that was very commendable that happened, that the government came up with recently was the sandbox regulatory framework. So the sandbox licenses. I think what it says is that even if we don't have the legal framework around innovative ideas, you will be given a platform within certain regulations to come up with innovative ideas. Whether it's on the fintech side, it could be on the blue economy, it could be biotechnology, which is again linked to probably the blue economy as well. And once these innovative ideas are successful, then yes, there will be investment in those, and there will be a legal framework that will be built around that. So I think that is something extremely important. I mean, let's also remember in terms of fintech, we have around 20,000 people that work in the ICT industry in Mauritius, right? And you have more and more international companies, like I mentioned, Huawei, Accenture. There's a few others that are using Mauritius as a base because of the skill set that you have. And we're having actually a number of international skilled workers that are coming through as well, mainly from Africa. And coming back to what Roshan mentioned in terms of education hub, the focus is now going more and more into fintech. So how do we upskill the people? How do we skill the people to work in that industry? And you're seeing a lot of ideas in terms of fintech funds. We're talking about incubators. You have a few corporates in Mauritius that have started incubators as well. And then providing the financing to be able to attract the people and create those innovative ideas. And I think that the next step is really these innovative ideas. Mauritius is a small economy, right? What we build is actually not for Mauritius. What we build is actually for the continent. And we're trying to get people from the continent as well to come and work to build their ideas and on-sell to the continent.
Roshan, if I just come to you quickly as well, the mindset of the youth, the next generation of Mauritius, are people growing up saying, right, okay, I want to learn fintech, I want to learn how to code, I want to blockchain. Are people, do they have that go-ahead almost Singapore mentality that we talked about?
Interesting question. Fintech by nature is very disruptive, and I think and it takes time to build up an industry. Yes, people do have this mindset, but I think there is definitely a gap, and I don't think we can be everything to everyone. And I think the solution resides in us opening up even more to skills from the continent or elsewhere, and to give a boost to that industry, to accelerate the industry. This is, I think, the way forward. Because by the time you educate, you get people back on the sort of work environment, it will take some time. But to give a boost, to accelerate the process, you need skills to come from elsewhere. But there is definitely this mindset. Although Mauritius has in the past, given the environment and the circumstances, have been a nation of accountants and lawyers and all of that, but there is definitely a move towards this more sophisticated sectors like the technology sector.
So Timo, if we come to you, it's not just the people in the world that's changing, also smart cities making their debut in Mauritius as well. I'm told it's called Mocha, for 15 to 20,000 people. It's not too far from the capital. Just paint me a picture of what it looks like. I mean,
so the group that we affiliated to, Mauritius Sotheby's International Realty, is owned by the ENL Group, which is one of the large groups in Mauritius. We are developing a city called Mocha Smart City. It's strategically located between the highways that go down to or across to Grand Bay and to Port Louis. It's where 40% of the population and 70% of the spending power is, so strategically very well located. We are right next to Iben, which is the decentralized CBD of Mauritius, out of Port Louis. And what these smart cities, the whole concept behind it is to offer a work, live, play environment. So world-class infrastructure, entertainment, great accommodation at affordable prices. And yeah, where Mocha is at a massive advantage compared to our competitors out there is that all our infrastructure already exists. So we've already built the shopping centres, we've already built the sports facilities, the education, the university and the primary and secondary schools already exist. So we've taken this infrastructure that we've been developing over the last 10 years, and we are now implementing our smart city concept and including the residential and commercial side. For example, a couple of the big corporates have just moved into our smart city. We are putting in a centralized railway system which will connect the whole city. So yeah, it's strategically very well located. It's very from a living perspective, it's aspirational for the middle income group coming through. So we're already seeing a shortage of accommodation in that area, and as a result, your rental returns and your capital growth on these property investments are phenomenal. So yeah, as a smart city concept, we're leading the way, and from a Mauritius point of view, I want to add one more thing. It's really a partnership between government and the private sector. So the private sector is going in and developing this infrastructure, and in return, government is putting a whole lot of incentives in place to develop it.
Patrick, if I could ask you, how strong is the economic multiplier from something like this smart city that Timo's talking about, in terms of jobs and the money going forward?
Look, what happens is that you look at Eben, for example, where a lot of us are based, which is the new sort of financial city in Mauritius, right? Financial hub. I mean, over the last 10 to 15 years, its buildings have mushroomed over there. I mean, you've got a lot of the international law firms, you've got most of the banks that have offices there, you've got the management companies that are there. I think, over the past 10 to 15 years, you can see very clearly and very, very visibly how this financial center has grown in Mauritius. And, what happens is that once you have the infrastructure, you can attract the bigger players as well, right? And one thing that we will need to do as a financial center is to attract more of the international banks, more of the international law firms, the large firms, and really get the right skill set on board as well. Human capital plays a very important role in the service sector. So I think if you've got the right infrastructure, you can go towards that model, and we don't have a choice. We will have to do that going forward.
Kate, if I could ask you, I mean, in your business, are there signs of the world's large legal firms coming to Mauritius? Are you seeing that?
I'm not sure of any that are going to be opening in the near future, but I think Denton's opening in Mauritius has been pretty huge, and it's been operational since October last year. And there are other international brands and or law firms that are part of international networks. I'm sure there will be more, which will be competition for us, but I'm sure there will be a lot more to come.
Okay, Roshan, well, it seems that with these smart cities, clearly the population's going to increase and the demand for services is going to increase in Mauritius. Bearing in mind that your tax rate is fairly low, does the state have enough muscle and money to deal with the demands of its growing population?
An interesting anecdote is that in about 30 years ago or more, tax rates in Mauritius used to be more than 30%, and then gradually it's been brought down to about 15% now, and that's 15% for everyone, whether you're a citizen, you're resident in Mauritius, or for outside people. But what they realize is that in relative terms, now the authorities are collecting more money out of the 15% that they used to collect back then with 30% or more. So this is interesting. But then what your question, I think, what comes out of your question, one thing that we are lacking is also critical mass in Mauritius. There are only 1.3 million of us, and there's only so much that you can do with 1.3 million people. So I think there has to be an active sort of push towards bringing in more people, whether it's through residency in Mauritius or skilled labor to Mauritius. And then I think it will finance itself in the end. When people come over, they finance more, they do more business in Mauritius. I think, yes, there will be enough money for that. We are a growing economy. The finances are pretty healthy. People are cautious about the budget and everything is managed in Mauritius. And I think coming from a nation which has been a monocrop economy about 40 years ago to where it is now, diversified economy with so many industries, I think the opportunities will remain.
Okay, we're getting near to the end of our discussion here. But get around the table. What are the problems? What are the challenges that Mauritius still has to overcome?
I think the challenge, when we look at Africa, for example, is connectivity, air connectivity. So if you want to attract people, they have to be able to fly into Africa pretty easily. So that needs to be addressed. I think, as Roshan mentioned just now, the other challenge is getting the right people to come and work in Mauritius. Okay, to be able to do that as well, we need to government, private sector, regulators have to come together. And I think there was a blueprint that has been prepared. I think everyone needs to adhere to that blueprint, have a common vision, work towards that vision, and identify whether it's companies that we want to come and set up in Mauritius, make Mauritius a regional center, the people that we want them to bring as well, and how do we mix and match the talent from from international markets with Mauritius and make this a real regional financial center. I think all of that needs to come together.
Timo.
Eric has said pretty much everything. So, no, I think there are challenges. I think government's been really proactive in terms of dealing with them. From a property perspective, I think is what we touched on earlier, making sure that we remain competitive relative to our global competitors. So you mentioned it, Cyprus, Malta, etc., and making sure that there's continuity within the fiscal and advantages that are offered to a global audience that's coming into Mauritius and choosing to invest there and choosing to make it their home. So I think those are the main issues from our side.
Roshan, what do you think your country needs to do to make it?
We've actually gone somewhere already. The Ease of Doing Business report came out recently. We are 13th in the world out of 190 countries, which is not too bad at all. But in terms of the financial services sector itself, I think we need to have more breadth and more depth in what we offer. So far, it's been mostly cross-border investments, corporate banking, which cross-border investments is about 60% of the value added in the economy, in the financial services sector. Corporate banking is about 30%. So now we need to move on to wealth management, private banking. So there is obviously a roadmap on how to do that. So we have to remain focused on that, and I think it should be good for us, at least in the financial services sector.
And finally, Kate, well, what do you think, Mauritius? Where could it improve? What problems it need to overcome to go forward in the future?
I think attracting developing and retaining world-class talent and skills, including those Mauritians who have left and are living in other parts of the world, as well as on the corporate and financial side to create a real depth for the IFC.
Okay, well, thank you very much to my guest, Parik Tulsida, Senior Executive, Treasury and Markets, Afri-Asia Bank, Timur Geldenhuys, Sotheby's International Realty, Roshan Nathu, the Managing Director of Rogers Capital, and Kate Bosman, the Senior Associate at Denton's Mauritius. Thank you very much for joining this early conversation on the day of the Africa Investment Forum. We'll be crossing over there live soon for the ministerial panel, for the presidential panel over there. But from me, Chris Bishop and the team here on the CNBC Africa special, it's goodbye.